we're going to listen to Parker do redos of his speeches from yesterday on the TOC round 4 between Greenhill and Harvard Westlake. He's going to give the 2AR and going for conditional word picks bad. So yeah, follow along and watch part 1 of the video before you watch this part. I'm ready.
Cool. You see, this is that you're contradicting yourself since you're committing interpretations of the 1AR, the 1C, which are obviously to 2AR arguing itself, which is obviously impossible, which means you just reject this argument, the after side, which is the one, which are obviously want committing interpretation. Second, this is intervention because there's no justification when good defense is good enough, which means that the least judges deciding and putting in what they think that is, which arguments are reversibility since there's no way we can get past a judge just intervenes against it, but there's no way we can get past abusive substantive arguments by just debating more. Now it's on the Condo Debate, on the debate arguments. The framing issue here is that you're punishing the conditionality arguments by giving them a conditional counterpoint, taking them for them, which is the root cause of my abuse claim, which means it rectifies none of the abuse stories that which arguments. That's the whole point of the theory claim. And I say, I still don't have to answer the counterpoint, but the same argument still have to win that the counterpoint is theoretically legitimate, and then win the case out with stats goes exactly what you in conditionality. What I'm criticizing you say, keep the substance debate, but turn a bit for a long-term substance debate because I stop you from reading abusive arguments. They know they're going to lose the round, so they're not going to beat them anymore. So it means that I was arguing duration now. The interpretation, counter-interpretation, the framing issue on the interpretation, counter-interpretation is that only my offense links to on a strength link a unique interaction between conditionality and word picks, which means that even if adversarial comes first in the abstract, my ground standard comes first with the size of the question. And the second place you can vote off is the I'm going to win a straight turn to the adversary standard now. Let's go on the live and send the interpretation. You can have every conditional word picks. The violation is succeeded now. Here, going to the ground standard. This is the first place and the easiest place we can vote at because the word picks with 6 minutes of AC offense, which means I have to go for spending a ton of time in the 1AR reconstructing offense against the word pick, spending 4 minutes on it, but I can't do that in the conditionality because you'll just kick it. I mean, I lose my only strategy to rectify the abuse of the word picks. Now, you say this happens in normal conditionality, but the unique difference is that conditionality does not moot 6 minutes AC offense, which I can usually be the case, but that's not the case with word picks. Now, you say times skew, but I not times you say strategy skew claim about I lose my only strategy skew, my only strategy to rectify the abuse claim. Now, you say test the aspect for multiple scenarios and attitudes. You can group these arguments first. There's no link because you can still read a word pick. You can just have to read it for 7 minutes unconditionally, or you can just read multiple counterplans. They just cannot be word picks. Or second is that I want a link turn to your argument because there's a depth advantage just discussing the word pick for 7 minutes because then we're talking about only discourse, or you can read the conditionality of you can read multiple conditional counterplans. They just can't be word picks, which means that you have to actually engage through 1AC, which means I both have a depth and a breadth advantage, which is obviously compared to better. Now, the counter interpretation, you say that the advantage to the app is a disadvantage to the squo, which means it should be easy to win the status quo. First, I still have to win 2 layers to win. I win the plan out with the status quo and the counter plan. Even the second layer is slightly easier. It's still 2 layers compared to 1, which means that there's still no abuse claim. Second, the 2-1R proves empirically in this specific circumstance that's not the case. It's not a foregone conclusion that I'm going to win substance debate because you spend 4 minutes on it and spend a very persuasive story. Now you say I can choose the plan, but first say predictability will warrant and defense are predictably claimed by. I can say ground skew claim. Second is I can't justify every word in the plan text. That's literally possible since there's 15 words. I need to spend at least a minute on them to justify any reasonable argument. That means that I need to have a 15-minute 1AC, which is supercharged with the fact that I probably need to justify offense as well. 3 is that topicality checks back on abusive plans, not word picks. That's compared to the better because topicality checks back more specific warrants, i.e. sometimes a new act would be justified for more education, but conditional word picks never will justify that. Could be that because they just say unequivocally you should use an abusive word pick.
How long was that?
3 minutes.
Okay. So, in terms of efficiency, the increase in speed was offset by the increase in double breaths as well as the stumbling and the stuttering.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of how maybe going a little bit slower is the same amount of efficiency if you're not stumbling and you're not also taking inefficient breaths. I think that this is something worth practicing over the next few weeks, learning to go at that speed and being comfortable with not stuttering as much. And I think it's also worth practicing doing that while looking up off your computer screen. So I noticed you were looking at your computer screen way less, or way more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I also think that you have an inconsistent breathing pattern. And what I mean by that is you will basically take 2 breaths and then go for like 5 to 10 seconds, and then take a ginormous breath, then go for like 5 to 10 seconds, and then be forced to take 2 breaths again. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're not breathing at a regular interval. Rather, you're breathing like as a forced necessity. So your mentality is like, I'm going to go as fast as I can for as long as I can, and then when I run out of breath, I'm going to take a breath. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And instead, the mentality should be, I'm going to go as fast as I can, but I'm going to regularly breathe every 3 seconds. or maybe you can go for 4 seconds at a time.
Yeah.
Be like, I'm going to go 4 seconds at a time and then take a breath.
Okay.
So that requires conscious effort. We can do a stop and go drill if you want, where we practice that breathing. And every time you get off that 4-second rhythm, I stop you and make you start over again. It would be helpful. It would be very frustrating for you. But yeah, I do think that needs to be fixed. And so does the lack of looking up from your computer screen. You are dependent on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was specific when I was trying to go faster.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want to miss arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I understand. I'm being super nitpicky, right? Like, what you're trying to do is not easy. So I'm definitely being harsh. That was not a bad speech by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm looking for perfection there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are significant improvements that can be made. So if you can go at that speed without stumbling, go back and listen to Jackson and go back and listen to Rom. Those are the two debaters that come to mind immediately that were at that speed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those were probably the two fastest theory debaters I've seen on video, and they were able to go at that speed and also look you in the eye. So in terms of like 1 to 10, 10 being the GOAT on theory and 1 being like the worst ever, you're probably at like an 8, which is a good place to be. But if we want to try to get from an 8 to a 9 and then a 9 to a 10, quality of argumentation, persuasiveness when you're spinning it, and speed plus eye contact are the 4 things that can be improved upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can think about each of them as 0.5 points, and when you get each of them down, you'll move from like an 8 to an 8.5, an 8.5 to a 9, 9 to a 9.5, 9.5 to the GOAT. Cool?
Okay.
Yeah, and then obviously this gets way harder doing it in real time, where you don't have the prep and the practice. Yeah. When you can do it in real time, that's when you've arrived.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So I think it's worth putting this speech aside. If we want to practice your breathing, we can. But this speech is good, and I think this speech is way more holistic than the first time you gave it, right? Much stronger speech. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So for those of you following along at home, hope you guys have gotten a lot out of this. Practice the conditional word picks bad stuff. They're probably bad.